Uh, Good evening, everyone. And this is I think, a beautiful topic, very interesting topic to begin with. The series of lectures by the very enterprising the Speed Group. So, what I'm going to talk about is theories of origin of the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So, March 11th, 2020 would be considered a historic day in the medical field. This is the statement which Dr. Tedros from the WHO said. We have therefore made assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as pandemic. I think children, our next generation, all of them will perhaps remember these words, will spread it on to their next generation, because this is probably the life-changing or a historical event which occurred in probably the remarkable event of our century. Now, without a doubt, the SARS-CoV-2 is our hero, right? Whether you like him or not, he is or he or she, the SARS-CoV-2, has dominated our thinking, our actions for the last few months. And just like any other comic book hero, there is a theory of origin. And an origin theory, just like the comic book heroes, may not be one. There might be multiple theories of origin. And today, just like the theory of origin of the Spider-Man or a Batman, we'll be discussing two different stories or two different theories of origin of the COVID-19 virus. Let's talk about the first theory. The first story is that of poverty, right? We all know that poverty is the root cause of all evil, and that is what we'll be discussing first. Now, if you're not done so, please watch this brilliant movie, Parasite. I think, probably if Shakespeare was alive today, he would have loved this movie. This is a classic Shakespeare story. And one very interesting line from the story is, the husband tells his wife, they're rich, but they're still so nice. The wife says, they're nice because they are rich. Now, Western countries have been blessed with a lot of money, have been blessed with a lot of resources. They've always been rich. They will never understand the situation poor countries go through. They will never understand the cycles which developing countries go through. China was once, now probably a developed country by a lot of extent, was like us, was a developing country, was a poor country. And poverty led to a lot of problems. Now, we all know that SARS-CoV-2 is a zoonotic virus. There's one theory which is probably almost proven. Is that the SARS virus, the current pandemic virus, is very similar to the virus that has been circulating in the bats. And probably, perhaps there was an intermediate host, or perhaps it directly came in contact with the human beings, but there was a transmission from the bats to the human beings. But one more hero in this story is a very beautiful and a very strange looking character known as a pangolin. Now, pangolin is basically very similar to an anteater. Now, you and I would probably be perhaps disgusted by this animal, but this is actually a very, very preferred and very exotic type of meat which is eaten in the Chinese. Now, one theory suggests is that the virus, probably the virus from the pangolin combined with the virus from the bat, and perhaps led to a chimera which infected the human being. The reason why these theories have been is that, the bat and the pangolin perhaps met somewhere. Let's talk about that. But let's first go back to the 1970s. 1970 China was very different from what we see the pictures of China today. It was a nation in poverty because the communists thought that they could run farming, which they were so wrong. Millions were dying of hunger. And hunger is something which makes people do strange things. And one thing, probably what Indians would call it as a jugaad that started in China was wildlife farming. Small mom and pop farmers started raising wild animals in their backyard whose meat could be sold in the market. I mean, who likes really eating snakes and turtles and bats? But what is now exotic was once upon a time the only food these people had. And this led to the emergence of wet markets in China. Again, a lot of us would be disgusted by these pictures. I've actually chosen the mildest picture. Wet markets are where the animals are killed live and the fresh meat is then served to the customers. And wet markets in China, you can get meat of almost every possible animal on this planet, including the rare ones and probably, about to get extinct ones like the tigers. So this is a typical wet market in China. Now, a wet market which we are concerned about was a Wuhan seafood wholesale market in Wuhan, China. Now, remember this name because we will come back to this again and again. So, where did hairy meet Sally, or where did bat meet pangolin? The bat met pangolin at this seafood market. And when the bat met pangolin, it created a chimera, and this chimera probably infected the human beings. And this chimera went on to spread to a lot of people. What is also very unfortunate was that this period was also the period when there was the Chinese New Year, and a lot of people from Wuhan travel overseas to celebrate the New Year. And unfortunately, this travel is what led to the spread of the virus throughout the world. And rest we know is history. As of January 2020, only a few countries were affected. But as you go along, and if you see this little short video which we have, you can see how the virus is spreading throughout the world. Right? And by March 11, 2020, when it was declared as a pandemic, the virus had spread to 114 countries. I'm repeating, by March 11, 2020, the virus had spread to 114 countries. So what is the evidence for the theory that the virus actually came as a freak of nature when the bat met the pangolin? Because it has happened before. Previously also, this earlier SARS virus had originated in a wet market in China. In southern China, it was a different place. Also, the sequences are almost identical. 79.6% of the identity of SARS-CoV-1 is very similar to SARS-CoV-2. Further, the novel coronavirus, 96% of it is identical at the genome level to a bat coronavirus. This comes from a beautiful article published in the Nature journal, right? And I've highlighted the name of a person, Shizheng Li, right? Remember this name. We'll come back to this lady again and again. Also, the pangolin theory. The pangolin coronavirus is 91% identical to the current SARS-CoV virus at the genomic level. So the current virus shares its genomic structure almost 90% with the pangolin and the bat virus. And hence it can probably be said that these are the origins. Also, this is not what, which we knew suddenly. We already knew this and we were warned about this. Back in 2015 in Nature Medicine, again from the same group by Shizheng Li, there was an article published which says a SARS-like cluster of circulating bat coronavirus shows potential for human emergence. Like I said, friends, we were already warned. And we are also warned by, so probably the richest man in the world at one point of time, Bill Gates. He had published a perspective back in the day in NEJM, and the TED talk which I've shown the picture is now very famous. So, Occam's razor, right? We all know what Occam's razor is. If one explanation for a theory is very simple and can explain everything, the simplest explanation is the one which is probably true, right? So, the first important take-home message is the SARS-CoV-2 virus is a zoonotic virus with possible origin from bat and or pangolin. The Hunan seafood market, the wet market, was probably the source of origin. But let's talk about the second story. What you see is not all there is. The story doesn't end here. In fact, the interesting part begins now. Again, coming back to Occam's razor. An answer to a question could be simple, but it could be wrong. But it could be complex and right. So what are the discrepancies in the first story? First and foremost, This is a very interesting study which was published by the Forrester group from Cambridge. What they found was that there is not one, but there are three major variants of the current coronavirus, which they named it as A, B, and C. Interestingly, the strain which was found in China and isolated from the seafood market was variant B and not variant A. The strain or the variant reported outside of China was a variant C. What about the variant A? Now, variant A is the ancestor variant, is the first variant. This was not reported from China. Where did it come from? The variant A is most likely the original and the oldest strain based on the genetic analysis. Why this is so? Because the variant A is the one which most closely resembles the bat coronavirus, as it was reported in the first article by Shi Zhengli. Variant A is also found outside of China, but it has not been reported from China. Is this a Chinese deception? Or did this virus originate outside of China and then got imported to China? And then China was blamed for everything. We really don't know. What is also very interesting is that one of the first articles published from Wuhan, China in Lancet actually showed that 34% of the early wave patients from Wuhan did not have exposure to seafood market. I repeat, 34% of the patients who first came did not have exposure to the seafood market. Where did these patients get affected from? We really don't know. Then comes the question of the elusive patient zero. We really don't know so far who is the patient zero. What is very interesting is that the first patient, as reported by the Lancet article, the first patient started having symptoms on 1st December 2019. That means, considering the incubation period, probably the patient was infected about 14 days back. However, what is the most interesting thing? This patient did not have an epidemiological link with other cases. This patient was completely separate. The probable patient zero was not linked with the seafood market. Mark my words, my friends, probably the patient zero was not linked with the seafood market. How did he get the infection? We really don't know. So what was the role of the Wuhan Institute of Virology in all this mess? The Wuhan Institute of Virology is the leading center for SARS virus study in China. It is a coincidence. Can you tell it a coincidence that the leading place where the study is being done is also the place where the virus actually originated? And this is led by a renowned virologist, Shi Zhengli. We mentioned her twice in the previous papers. She's also very popular as the Bat Woman. A popular conspiracy theory suggests that actually the virus came from the lab. Now, was it a leak, accidental leak, or was it perhaps a deliberate leak? We don't know. So, let's talk a little bit about Shi Zhengli. Shi Zhengli is the author of multiple papers on this virus. And like I said, back in 2015, she published a paper in Nature Medicine where actually she warned about the existence of such a virus which could probably go to the human beings. Also, what is very, very, very concerning is this line. They are probably constructing a SARS-like chimeric virus which could probably infect rats, and they are also trying to probably consider it for non-human primates. Did this lab create a chimera which got leaked and infected a human being? Very difficult to say. So, does the scientific community accept the lab origin of the virus? The good thing is, the scientific community of virologists has actually come to defend the renowned virologist Shi Zhengli. There is a very interesting paper again in Nature which says the proximal origin of SARS-CoV-2. This paper from renowned virologists say that, and I just quote, the computational analysis predict that the interaction, what was seen, was not ideal, it was not perfect. So it was made probably in the lab, the interaction would have been better with the ACE2 receptor. And hence they say that the spike protein, which is found characteristically in this SARS virus, probably resembles more of a zoonotic origin rather than something which was made in a lab. And hence there is a strong evidence that the SARS-CoV-2 was not a product of a purposeful manipulation. However, since they say that we observed that all notable SARS-CoV-2 features, including the receptor binding domain and the polybasic cleavage site is related to the coronavirus in nature, and they do not believe that it has originated from a lab. So what they're saying is that this is still a natural selection and not a purposeful manipulation done at a lab level. So the scientific community does support Xi Jiangli and probably gives it a clean chit. However, there are unanswered questions. And the first and very important unanswered question is, I've taken this directly from Google Maps. The Wuhan Institute of Virology, the leading authority on SARS virus, is just 30 minutes from the Hunan seafood market. Is this a coincidence? Who is the real patient zero? We still don't know. Why doesn't China declare or disclose the real patient zero? Why doesn't the Chinese government crack down on these wet markets? The wet markets led to emergence of the virus not once but twice. It led to two deadly diseases. The first was thankfully curtailed. The second one is, you know what has happened, right? Why doesn't the Chinese government stop these wet markets? What is also very interesting, look at the numbers from Beijing and Shanghai. This is numbers taken from yesterday. The number of patients in Beijing and Shanghai are less than the number of patients in Delhi and Mumbai. Why is it? Why is it so? Is China more effective in social distancing? Are they more effective in curtailing the epidemic? And also, it all comes down to money, honey. Why did the Chinese market escape the economic meltdown? Across the world, every stock market fell. Yet, the curious case of Chinese share markets escaped the coronavirus shock. Why is it so? Why the secrecy? Why all this secrecy? Why all this deliberate manipulation? Why all this non-transparency to declare the disease or to declare the data from the disease? I leave it for you to think, friends. Right? We don't have answers to this so far. But just to summarize, there are two theories. Theory one, it says that it probably originated from a combination of bats and pangolin. The second theory is that it probably originated from a lab. Thank you. Stay safe. Stay away from corona.